What is Art? By Leo Tolstoy, Chapter 8. But if art is a human activity whose aim is to carry to people the highest and best feelings that people have reached, how could it happen that humanity lived through a certain fairly long period of its life, from the time people stopped believing in the church teaching down to our own day, without this important activity? How could it settle instead for the trivial activity of an art that gives nothing but pleasure? To answer that question, we must first correct a common mistake. People credit our art with the standing of true art, art belonging to all mankind. We have grown so used to this naive habit. We take not only the Caucasian stock to be the finest stock of men, but also the Anglo-Saxon race, if we are English or American, and the German race, if we are Germans, and the Gallo-Latin, if we are French, and the Slavonic, if we are Russians. So when we speak of our art, we are entirely convinced that our art is not only true art, but the best art and the only art. Yet our art is not the only art, as the Bible was once held to be the only book. It is not even the art of the whole of Christendom. It is the art of a very small section of that part of mankind. One could speak of a national Jewish art, a Greek art, an Egyptian art, and one can speak today of Chinese, Japanese, and Indian art, art shared by a whole people. Such art, common to a whole people, existed in Russia before Peter, and existed in European societies until the 13th and 14th centuries. But since the upper classes of European society lost their faith in the church teaching, and did not accept true Christianity, and were left with no faith at all, we can no longer speak of the art of the upper classes of Christian nations as though it were the whole of art. From the moment the upper orders of the Christian nations lost their faith in church Christianity, the art of the upper classes broke away from the art of the people. There came to be two arts, the art of the people and the art of the gentry. And so here is the answer to the question of how mankind could live through a period of time without real art, putting in its place an art that serves pleasure alone. It was not all mankind that lived without true art, nor even any large part of it. It was only the upper classes of Christian European society, and even they only for a comparatively short time, from the beginning of the Renaissance and the Reformation down to our own day. The consequence of this absence of true art was exactly what it had to be: the corruption of the class that used that art. All the tangled, unintelligible theories of art, all the false and contradictory judgments about it, and above all the self-assured way our art digs itself deeper into its false path, all of this springs from one assertion. The assertion has passed into common use and is taken for unquestionable truth, though it is staggering in its plain falsehood. It says that the art of our upper classes is the whole of art, the true art, the one universal art. This assertion is exactly the same in kind as the assertion of religious people of the various confessions who hold that their religion is the only true religion. It is wholly arbitrary and plainly unjust, and yet it is calmly repeated by everyone in our circle, in full confidence that it cannot be wrong. The art we possess is the whole of art, the real art, the only art. And meanwhile 2/3 of the human race, all the peoples of Asia and Africa, live and die without knowing anything of this one supreme art. Nor is that all. In our own Christian society, hardly 1 person in 100 makes use of the art we call the whole of art. The remaining 99/100ths of our European peoples live and die, generation after generation, in punishing labor, never having tasted this art. And the art is of such a kind that even if they could reach it, they would understand nothing in it. By the aesthetic theory we profess, we grant that art is either one of the highest expressions of the idea, of God, of beauty, or else the highest spiritual pleasure. We grant too that all people have equal rights, if not to the goods of the body, then at least to the goods of the spirit. And meanwhile 99/100ths of our European people, generation after generation, live and die in the punishing labor needed to produce our art, and never use it. And still we calmly declare that the art we produce is the real art, the true art, the only art, the whole of art. Point out that if our art were true art, the whole people would share in it, and the usual answer runs like this: if not everyone makes use of the art we have, the fault lies not with the art, but with the false ordering of society. One can imagine a future in which physical labor is partly taken over by machines, and partly lightened by being fairly shared out, and in which the work of producing art is done by turns. There is no need, they say, for the same people always to sit under the stage shifting the scenery, hauling up the machinery, working the pianos and the horns, setting the type and printing the books. The people who do all this could work only a few hours a day, and in their free time enjoy every blessing of art. So say the defenders of our exclusive art, but I do not think they believe their own words. They cannot help knowing two things. The first is that our refined art could only arise out of the slavery of the working masses, and can only continue as long as that slavery lasts. The second is that only on condition of punishing labor by the workers can the specialists, the writers, the musicians, the dancers, the actors reach the refined degree of skill they do reach, and produce their refined works of art. Only on those conditions can there be a refined public to prize such works, free the slaves of capital, and it will be impossible to produce art of this refined kind. But suppose we allow what cannot be allowed, and say that ways might be found for the whole people to share in art, the art that passes among us for art. Even then another consideration appears, and it shows that our present art cannot be the whole of art. The art is completely unintelligible to the people. In earlier times poetry was written in Latin. Today the works of our art are just as unintelligible to the people as if they were written in Sanskrit. The usual answer is that if the people do not now understand this art of ours, that only proves how undeveloped they are, and that the same thing has happened at every fresh step art has taken. At first it was not understood, and afterwards people grew used to it. It will be the same with our art, say its defenders. It will be understood once the whole people is as educated as we are, we of the upper classes who produce it. But this assertion is plainly even less just than the first. We know that most of the works of upper-class art, the various odes, poems, dramas, cantatas, pastorals, paintings, and the rest, which delighted the upper classes of their time, were never afterwards understood or valued by the great mass of people. They remained what they had always been, an amusement for the rich of that time, and had meaning for no one else. From this we may conclude that the same will happen with our art. Sometimes, as proof that the people will one day understand our art, we are told that certain works of so-called classical poetry, music, and painting, which the masses once did not like, begin to please them once they are pressed on them from every side. But this only proves that a crowd, and above all a town crowd, half spoiled already, has always been easy to train, once its taste is twisted, to like any art you please. Besides, this art is not produced by that crowd nor chosen by it. It is pushed on the crowd in the public places where art is within its reach. For the vast majority of working people, our art is out of reach because of its cost, and it is foreign to them in its very content, since it carries the feelings of people far removed from the conditions of working life that belong to the great bulk of mankind. What gives pleasure to a man of the rich classes cannot even be understood as pleasure by a working man. It stirs no feeling in him at all, or else it stirs feelings that are the direct opposite of those it stirs in an idle and jaded man. Take for instance the feelings of honor, of patriotism, of being in love, which make up the main content of our present art. In a working man they rouse nothing but bewilderment and contempt or indignation. And so even if the mass of working people were given the chance in their free hours to see, to read, to hear everything that counts as the flower of our art, as is partly done in the towns through picture galleries, popular concerts, and books, the working man would understand nothing of our refined art, so far as he is still a working man and has not begun to cross over into the ranks of those whom idleness has spoiled. And if he did understand it, most of what he understood would not lift his soul, it would corrupt it. For thinking and sincere people, then, there can be no doubt that the art of the upper classes can never become the art of the whole people. And so if art is an important matter, a spiritual good needed by all people, as religion is, which is what the worshippers of art like to say, then it must be within reach of everyone. And if it cannot become the art of the whole people, then one of two things is true. Either art is not the important matter it is made out to be, or the thing we call art is not that important matter. This dilemma cannot be solved, and so clever and unscrupulous people solve it boldly by denying one side of it, namely the right of the working masses to have any part in art. These people say straight out what lies at the bottom of the matter. Only the beautiful spirits, the elect as the Romantics called them, or the supermen as the followers of Nietzsche call them, can take part in the highest beauty as they conceive it, and enjoy the highest pleasure that art gives. The rest, the coarse herd, unable to feel such pleasures, must serve the lofty pleasures of this higher breed of men. The people who speak this way are at least not pretending. They do not try to join what cannot be joined. They plainly admit the truth, which is that our art is the art of the upper classes and of no one else. And that, in essence, is how art has been understood, and still is understood, by everyone occupied with art in our society.